and what these books mean. Like they're really sort of your inspiration, a big part of who you are, and just what they mean to you.
Oh, that's a great question because they mean so much to me. When I was 12 years old, I wrote in my diary I was going to be a writer when I grew up. I spelled it wrong. But I've always had this desire to tell stories. And I've always wanted, in some way, to inspire people, to bring hope to people. And in the process, of course, I did that for myself. And it was a number of years before I became a full-time writer. Like so many people who are writers, I had to have day jobs, a lot of things that I did, interesting things along the way. But this means so much to me, especially in this time, this past couple of years, when I've been able to write stories that I called shades of hope, and to bring stories that have been given to me by others and that I've learned along the way. And I sometimes feel like they just come from, I don't know where, my DNA or somewhere. But it feels so good to be able to share those stories with others and hopefully uh, give them a sense that we can survive what we need to survive. We can do whatever we need to do. There have been others that have had terrible times. There are others who have had tragedies. And no matter what happens to us, there are other people who can support us and help us, and we can get through those times. And hopefully, my writing helps others do just that.
Thank you, Linda. We definitely need that. And as you and I were talking backstage, today in the news, there's tragedy. I mean, you don't have to go too far on the internet to find some story of something horrific happening, whether it was planned or it wasn't. So, do you find just in the course of your life that the stories just come to you, that, like you mentioned, other people, like anything could possibly be a story that could be written about?
Absolutely. All we have to do is look around, and it's just incredible how many inspirational stories that we see. My journey in doing some serious writing, not when I was 12, my writing back then wasn't that serious, but my journey of doing serious writing started when I was 28 years old. And I was widowed. My first husband died when he was 33 years old. He had cancer, Agent Orange, Vietnam. And I've told this story many times, but it's true that that was what inspired me to figure out how I could get through this, because it was such a devastating time. And every picture I'd ever had in my head of what my life was going to be like was gone. And I think that's what happens to us when tragedy strikes. We've had a notion of where we thought we were going in our life, and it just doesn't go that way. And then we're stuck in limbo, not knowing which direction to take at first. It takes some time to figure it out. And so when that happened to me, I found that writing was my salvation, writing a story and talking to others. And I was shocked to find out I wasn't the only young widow on the face of the earth. There were many who were younger than me. And so by listening to others tell their stories, and I joined a group of widows, and hearing what others had to say, I found out, first of all, that I wasn't as crazy as I thought I'd become, because you really do think you're losing your mind. And I found out that we all had those same thoughts, those same feelings. They're similar, at least. And then for those who felt differently, for example, so many of us missed our husbands. We had loved them, and we felt like we could hardly go on without them. But there were a few widows that I met along the way who were actually kind of happy they were gone. So uh, assimilating all of that and figuring all of that out and telling those stories uh, was such a relief to me. And relief is the word that often comes to mind for me when I'm writing, and that is that it feels like, oh, I've gotten this story out of me. I've gotten this burden off of my chest, and hopefully it will help somebody else. So that's what's so great about it. I love it.
Thank you for sharing that. You bring up something really important, which is all of us have things that happen to us. It's just the way things are. And when we keep it inside because we feel that we're different or we feel ashamed or whatever it is that we feel, that's when our life can take us down a different path that might not be the best one for us. But when we find like-minded people or a community of people who are experiencing the same thing, it really does change everything, doesn't it?
It really does. When I found out that there were other widows who had done some of the things that I had done, for example, that I thought were so weird. And I thought I'm the only crazy person on earth who would do this, but keeping an item of their clothing so that you would have their smell. Uh, Still talking to them from time to time, setting the table every now and then the way you used to, even though you know they're not going to be there, but just those kinds of things. And I found out everybody did that. We were all doing the same thing. And so I felt a kindred spirit with these other people who'd gone through that. And and I think no matter what the situation is, there are others. And I know the psychologists call it grandiose individuality. And that is when something bad happens to one of us, we have a tendency to think, I'm the only person on the face of the earth that this has ever happened to. No one else could possibly be as miserable and forlorn as I am. And the reality is, there are other people who feel the same thing that you feel. You're not the only one. And there are others who can support you, and you can support them as well. And so this grandiose individuality, I'm the only one this has ever happened to. Or, of course, I know it's happened to other people, but it's never been as bad for anyone else as it is for me. Or, I know it's been bad for them, but I don't care. It just hurts me so badly, I don't care. So, seeking out others in the same situation can be so helpful. And we found ourselves even sometimes, and it surprised us, even laughing at some of the things we had done that we thought were so inane, and yet they were very common. And so that commonality is important for all of us.
Yes, I definitely agree with you on that. I'm wondering, as a young bride, and losing your husband to cancer, how angry did you feel? Was there any anger?
uh, yes, there was a lot of anger, angry at everyone, angry at the Vietnam War, angry at war, angry at the world in general. Let me see, angry at politicians, angry at food at one point, because I really thought if we had better food, it might have kept him alive, might keep cancer patients alive. I mean, you get irrational. But mostly I was angry at God. I couldn't understand how God could do this to him or to anyone. He was such a good person. And I did the thing that I found was so common, where I would say, there are all these people in prison who are killers, and why not them? And why did God take a good person instead? And it doesn't make any sense. And it was a year, almost a year to the day. I remember this so well because it was such an inane experience. I was driving down the expressway, and all of a sudden I realized I had gone all day long without being angry at God. And not once all day had I felt riled up because of this horrible thing that God had done. And I realized then that I had stepped over a barrier, and I was becoming more rational, and that it I can't blame God, and I can't blame food. I actually had an argument with food one day, which I also found out was very common. Women didn't always get angry at food, but it could have been the laundry, it could have been a clerk in a store. But I had a fight with food in my kitchen one day and threw it all over the place because it hadn't saved him. And common thing to have that kind of fight with something that doesn't make a difference. But I finally knew that I had stopped being angry when I was driving down the expressway that day. and that I had accepted the reality, as much as I hated it, that this had happened and I needed to go on with my life. And that's when I started writing very seriously.
Linda, thank you for your transparency and authenticity. I really appreciate it. Do you think that that day that you realized that you weren't angry at God anymore, do you think that was a result of the personal work and development that you had done, or did something happen that was the catalyst? Do you recall?
I think it was a culmination of things. Uh, I had also taken a trip that he and I had planned on taking together, and I had gone to Egypt the summer before, and I had climbed the Great Pyramid, which you can't do anymore, but it's eaten away like stair steps, as you've seen in pictures. And back then, you could just climb up there. And I sat there in the middle of the night, all by myself. Another strange thing to do. I wouldn't recommend that to anybody. I'm not sure it was very safe, but it gave me time to reflect. I really thought, I'm halfway around the world. There's still this whole world going on around me. And that moved me. It really did. And so I think it all finally came together that day that I said, okay, I have to be finished being angry. It's time to move on. And there are other things that I need to do in my life. I mean, my goodness, I still have a gift of life. Why would I waste it being angry forever? I had to give it up.
Good for you. It sounds like that climb up the pyramid was able to give you a new perspective, and so you changed how you looked at things, and you let that anger go.
I did. I did. And then, it's so interesting. They say that you go through stages like denial and anger and negotiating and acceptance. And that came from Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And later in her life, she said she hated those stages. She was sorry she'd ever come up with them. And I still today, after all these years, hear people reciting them all the time. And she had decided the reason she hated them was because people just aren't that logical. When our hearts and souls are involved, we don't go through stages. We go up and down and all around and all over the place. And we may feel all of those things, but not in a nice, neat progression. And so I loved learning about that. I loved knowing that. That's the way it was for me. And I think that's the way it is for most of us.
I agree with you. Yes. And I want to move into the Shades of Hope collection that you have. And then I know you're going to do a reading from a different book. But I want to take a quick break. And we're going to watch a music video from a friend. His name is Tony Moore, Sir Tony Moore. He's a famous entertainer from the UK. And his single is Route 66. And then we'll hear from one of our sponsors, Diane Floyd Bame. And we'll be right back with more from Linda Hughes. Stay with us.
Thanks.
Hello, boys and girls, and welcome to Story Garden. Your host, Diane Bame. I'm so happy to have you here today.
Diane Floyd Bame tells wonderful stories that warm the heart, spark the imagination, and unite people and families across generations. For children, Diane's Harry the Camel connects with all of us who've ever wondered how different our lives might have been if only we'd been born something better, like a wonderful horse instead of an ordinary camel. In the end, we all learn along with Harry that there's nothing better than just being yourself. Diane's Little Girl in the Moon looks down on earthbound children and wonders if they know she's just like them. A story of love, home, and the bond between mother and daughter, its powerful theme that we're each of us different yet all of us the same plants a seed in children that promises to blossom within a loving and trusting grown-up. Diane's new biography, Rise, recounts the experiences of her grandmother, Ruby, to reveal the hidden strength of the human spirit. Ruby's story inspires all of us to become the best versions of ourselves. You'll find all of Diane's delightful books and much more at dianefloydbame.com. Visit DIANNFLOYDBOEHM.com. That's DianeFloydBaim.com.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to USA Global TV, home of Talking Heads. And sometime you might ask me what a talking head is, and I'll let you know. But it's a fantastic platform that we're rolling out in January of next year. It is leading experts from around the world who actually get their own show. They get their own 30-minute show to help educate the world with the knowledge and expertise that they have gained. So today our show is Stories of Hope, Inspiration, and Overcoming Adversity. And we are welcoming back author Linda Hughes. Hi, Linda.
Hey, hello. I love that music video that you just played. My husband now, after my first husband died, I remarried 11 years later. He was born on Route 66.
How about that?
He's going to love it. That was fun.
So that's a remake of the song, obviously. And what I think is so interesting is every time I watch it, I look for the little dog, and I always see I don't know if you notice that little dog, but I noticed that there's different animals in there. So today I saw there was a snake, and I've never seen the snake before, which I've run that so many times. It's crazy.
How cute.
But it's, from what I understand, Route 66 as it used to be doesn't exist anymore. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, it doesn't. It's the town my husband was raised in, Shamrock, Texas. It still goes through there, but there's a expressway not far away, and that's what is used today. And so it misses the town. It skirts the town, so the town pretty much died after that happened.
Oh, that's a shame.
Yeah, and then he left. So yeah.
Right. So you're not going back there. So Linda, let's turn our focus now to your writing, and in alignment with our show, Stories of Hope, Inspiration, Overcoming Adversity. Tell us about the Shades of Hope collection and what you would like our audiences to get from it, why they should purchase your books.
Oh, that's so nice. My Shades of Hope collection are different characters in different times and places, different eras. And I've taken stories that are so different and people that are so different, but the one thread that runs through every story is that there are people who overcome adversity, and in the end, they find a way, they find the hope that they need in order to move on with their lives. And some of the stories are lighter than others, some are more serious. But they all are, in the end, very loving tales. And one that I want to show you, it's called Black Forest. And all of these stories were inspired by either my own experiences or stories that I've been told by others. And this one, Black Forest, was written after I heard the story of how many women in Germany during World War II had no option in order to survive, especially as the war went on and things were so critical there, and it was hard to even get food. How many women had no option but to serve as prostitutes for the soldiers in order to feed their children? And these were real stories. And I guess if we stop and think about it, good common sense tells us that's probably happened throughout history in many wars. But this was the first time I had heard a story from the granddaughter of one of those women. And the granddaughter grew up not knowing this about her grandmother. And then as her grandmother aged and decided to tell the family what she had gone through, and basically what she had gone through so that her family could survive. It's just absolutely amazing. And so here was this granddaughter telling me the story and saying, I'm so lucky to be here and so happy to be here because of what my grandmother did. And so that's the kind of thing that I write. This one was inspired by that. And it starts with the woman. She's 95 years old. She's in a nursing home. She hasn't told her family her story yet. They don't know everything that she went through. And she decides it's time, that she may only have a few minutes left on this earth. She doesn't know how long. And she knows they won't like it, but she believes it's important for them to know what transpired before so that they could have the lives that they have today. And I always get so involved in the characters. I had so much fun writing the children, her children who had a hard time with it, but the granddaughter, the young woman who was happy, okay, I'm glad you did that. I'm glad that happened because here I am and I have a great life and I'm so grateful to my grandmother. So connecting the great grandmother with the great granddaughter was just such a delight to write. And if you don't mind, if we have a few minutes, I'll read just a couple of minutes of it. Is that okay?
Yes, please do. We'd love to hear it.
Cool. So here we are in 2015 in Harbor Springs, Michigan. And I picked that town just because I love it. It's a beautiful little town. Gertie's eyes flew open as she jerked awake from the nightmare memory, her breath clutching at the back of her throat. She gulped in deep pockets of air. 9.5 decades old, and still, after all these years, she didn't know how to label her emotions over this. Fear, sorrow, sadness, grief, humiliation, anger, hatred. That's what she usually settled on. Awake now, staring into darkness, the old woman considered her plight. In the morning, her granddaughter and great-granddaughter would visit. Reluctantly, obligingly, she suspected, to celebrate her 95th birthday. Should she tell them her story? Were they ready to hear it? No, they would never be ready to hear it, she decided. But she had to tell it. She had to give her descendants this one opportunity to get to know her, truly know her, before she died. After all, how many years, or days, or minutes could she have left? The time had come for them to know the sacrifices that were made. Thank you very much, to bring them the lives that they have today. Would they care? Who knew? Her decrepit body might be failing, but her mind was not. She remembered every detail of why and how they were where they were. Hang on to your panties, girls, she whispered into the night, a slight German accent still haunting her voice, even after more than 65 years of living in the United States. I am about to rock your pretty little worlds. And one reason I loved writing this was because I think it's important for most of us to look at those who came before us, to look at our ancestors, if we can. And I know not everybody has access to that information, but to remember that no matter what we're going through, there were others. And when we go way back, lots and lots and lots of others who went through every imaginable situation. And so we need to remember, if they could make it through what they went through, and they did, or we wouldn't be here, we can make it through whatever we have to do as well. And so I think it's important for all of us to listen to the stories of others, hopefully read the stories of others, and if possible, talk to our own elders, talk to others who may be the ages of our elders, and really pay attention to the fact that we're all in this together. And throughout time, people have survived so that we could be here. And that's what's so important to me about all of this. I have this one. I have another one is called Lilac Island that I placed on Mackinac Island, one of my favorite places in the world as well. And this is a story of a woman who is widowed and thinks she's never going to find love again in her life. And according to your dating expert on your last show, that may be true. But this is fiction. So in this story, she's surprised by how her life turns out. And then I also, another one I have on hand is Gold Mountain. And this one, this is what, from a male's point of view, and it's during the Klondike Gold Rush. And I wrote that one because I had the great pleasure of working in Alaska once in the dead of winter and all over Alaska. It was absolutely fabulous, so beautiful. I knew I had to write about it someday. And so looking at some of the hardships that people made it through during the Klondike Gold Rush in the 1800s. So you can see how the stories are each different, but they all have a happy ending. I always say my stories have a happy ending, but they're not what you expect. They're even better.
Thank you, Linda. You know, one of the other takeaways that I had from what you shared is, in that case, the grandmother knew that the information she was going to provide wasn't going to be welcomed. And how many times does that happen where we have something to share, we really need to share it, we want to share it, but we know that our significant other, our friends, our family, they're not going to want to hear whatever it is. And in some cases, it could be because we feel that they're going to look at us differently, and maybe they will. Or maybe they're going to be completely disgusted. They're going to have a judgment about what we're going to share. But yet in that case, she could have easily said, well, I've been here all these years, 95 years, I'm just going to take it to the grave. But instead, she decided to share it. And I think that was amazing.
It was fun to write. I'm telling you, it's fun to put myself into these characters and get all of that out. So thank you.
And Linda, how long do you think you will continue writing? In other words, is this something you're going to do for the rest of your time, or have you done it? You've done it so well that you're going to close that chapter, move on to something else?
I'm going to do this. I've always said I'll be on my deathbed and I'll still be writing.
She's still writing.
Oh, yeah, I got to get this one out. I love doing it. I feel like it's what I'm meant to do. And I'll just never quit. As long as I'm able, I'm going to keep writing. And I know a lot of writers feel that way. It's in our hearts.
It's beautiful. And in your life, do you find that when you want to communicate something to someone, is it more enjoyable, more meaningful for you to actually speak to someone to share your feelings, or because you are such an amazing writer, you'd rather write it down or send it in some type of written communication?
This is something I've had to work on in my life because it's always easier for me to write it down. And so, but when you're married to someone, instead of writing a letter and putting it in an envelope and handing it to them, it really better, which I had to work on. Sit down and talk about it. And I think the first few times I actually just sat down with them and read the letter. And I had to learn to just say, well, think about what I want to say and then say it.
You know, it's something that just popped into my mind as you were saying that, is I'm wondering, as a way to communicate, when you're reading the letter that contains your feelings, it's hard for someone to interrupt you, isn't it? I mean, wouldn't you have the audience, like your spouse would just let you read through the whole thing, as opposed to when you're trying to communicate, people interrupt us at times.
Yeah, and that's another thing I think that I know I've had to work on, and I think a lot of women have had to work on, frankly, and that is not allowing people to interrupt us, to say, wait, I'm not finished. I need to finish what I was saying. And sometimes we have to do that a number of times in a conversation in order to get done. But I've really had to learn to not be a coward and to speak up and stand up for myself in that way. And I'm pretty good at it now. I'll tell you, my husband will tell you I'm real good at it now. But
Now you're teaching courses on how to do it.
Yeah, but it took time.
Well, good for you, because I think that really is something that takes skill and work. And at any point, if it didn't go the right way the first or second or third time, you might be thinking to yourself, you know what, this feels awkward and uncomfortable. I'm just going to go back to the way I was doing it before.
Yep, yep. That's so easy to do, and I think we've all done that, of course. But then we go back to the way that we were, and we're even more uncomfortable there because we know we're not being true to ourselves. Just like the old lady in Black Forest, she knew she had to do that before she died. She had to be true to herself. And so going back just never settles right. It just doesn't work for us. And what happens, I think, if we do that too much is that then the angst and the anger builds up, and we end up then coming out with it in a way that isn't always appropriate, and it isn't the best way. And so we just need to do it, need to get it done.
And I love what you said there, because once we do grow and we might get the idea that we're going to go back to how it used to be, but we can't go there because it doesn't feel like us anymore. It's sort of like a skin you shed or some clothing that you took off that you're not putting back on.
Right. It's over. It's done. It's gone. It just doesn't work. Yep, that's right.
And Linda, you shared so many wonderful tips, and I'm just wondering, as we come to the end of our show, if you could share from your own personal experience. We talked about things in the news. We're coming out of this pandemic, hopefully, but there's always adversity. Whether we look for it or not, whether we plan for it, I have always said this. My dad and I had this list of all the potential things that could go wrong. We literally would write it down. And of course, none of those things happened. It was always things that weren't on the list, right? So my point is that who knows? But how can we pick ourselves back up? How can we, like you said, it took you a year in that case. So if you were going through a situation again where there was adversity, it might not take you a year because you've put the time and the effort and you've developed the skills. But what about people who are just starting their journey of learning to look inside and find that inner strength? What would you advise for them?
It's so important to do what you just said, to look inside, look at that inner strength. And I know during times like that, you often think you don't have any. It isn't there. But I promise you, it is there. And so sometimes we do need the objectivity of being with others, just like I was in a group. And we need to be able to reflect with others and sort of bounce off of them in order to see what it is that we have that can help us through. And I just so strongly believe in those connections, whether they're professional, whether you seek counseling, or whether you join a support group like I did, or whether you talk to friends and family members if they're helpful. But those connections are vital for us to get through. And interestingly, that is what helps us look deeper inside. And I know we need our alone time as well, so we can just think for ourselves, like I had on the pyramid, which was fantastic. But we truly need to remember we are connected to this earth and to others, and that's how we'll get through.
And I love that you touched on support groups. I've shared that I have 3 autoimmune illnesses. One of them, ulcerative colitis, since 1991, and I didn't talk about it at all till 2018 when I met the president of the group, and now I'm leading the group. So if when I think about all those years that I stayed silent and I just lived in pain and the shame of having bleeding ulcers, and now I talk about it all the time. It's a big deal. And I'm helping other people when they come to the support group. I can remember what I felt like that first time. And then you see, it might not be the first time they come, but at some point you see this huge, just getting rid of all of those things that they've stuffed down, all those feelings. And it's wonderful. So I highly recommend support groups as well.
Good. I'm glad to hear you're doing so much better.
Thank you. It's definitely been a long ride, but I should have been talking about it. I think that's one thing that has definitely come out for me, and you mentioned that as well. It's you will find someone else who has had something similar, and who also needs to share it. So I say don't sit in silence. Don't stay alone in the darkness, because it's not a great place to be, and there are other people who can help you and who need to be helped as well.
Yes, absolutely. Mm.
Linda, I'm going to spotlight you one last time, and if you could just share with our audience how they can contact you, how they can purchase your books, that would be terrific.
Thank you. That's great. My website is www.lindahughes.com, and Hughes is Hughes, like the man's name Hugh, and a whole bunch of them. And people get that confused a lot. So it's lindahughes.com. And then, of course, all of my books are on Amazon, and I'm on every social media platform you can imagine. Linda Hughes, author. So I'll see you there. Thank you so much. And Jacalyn, what a pleasure talking to you.
Oh, thank you so much. It's a pleasure talking to you. I felt this connection with you when I met you the first time. So I love that you're here, and I invite you to come back again anytime on any of our shows. And we've got some new shows, which is really exciting. We have the Power of Etiquette and Manners that started today. We also have the United Kitchen, which we had a chef from Scotland and a chef from Texas, which started today. And next week we have a new show that's focused on diversity and inclusion. So feel free to, yeah.
Great.
Thank you. Go over to drjacalyn.com and go ahead and book on any of our other shows.
Very good. Thanks.
Thank you, Linda. Have a lovely weekend, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye. Friends, whether you're watching or listening, please know that you are appreciated. Many of our guests on our shows do come from our fan base, and we are excited. Our numbers keep growing. We are on 11 different platforms. And then if you happen to miss the show, you can go to any of them. I always send people to YouTube, and I think you have to have a Gmail account. I'm not really sure, but to subscribe. But you can go to LinkedIn, Facebook. You can go over to Business Talk Radio's website, and you can hear our shows there if you are maybe driving and not able to watch. So we've got one more show today, and it's presenting Pet Psychic Amina, and our guest is Carla Francis. So we look forward to seeing you. That show is coming up momentarily. I think it's in 10 or 15 minutes. Until then, we'll see you. Thank you. Thanks, Linda. Bye.